Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Rachel Bloom with the CSU Alumni Association, and I'm so glad you've decided to join for our Farmers Market series with CSU Extension. This event is Produce Tips and Tricks. This is our last event in the series, but all recordings are available on our CSU Alumni Association YouTube channel. And while you're there, I definitely recommend you subscribe, so then you'll be updated on all of our awesome content as it comes available. I want to thank you all for participating today. And thanks to those of you who are already introducing yourselves in the chat. Please go ahead if you'd like and click all panelists and attendees and type your name, where you're watching from, and if you're an alum, what year you graduated. We are super excited that you're here and hope that this June 1st is starting really well for you. This is a webinar, so you're automatically muted with your camera off. So please use the Q&A or chat feature for any questions or comments throughout today's presentation. And we should have a little bit of time at the end as well for questions or comments. If we want to go ahead and move to the next slide, I'd love to shout out that we have many attendees here that are CSU Alumni Association members. So thank you so much for your membership. It makes events that we do possible. When you join the Colorado State University Alumni Association, you not only acknowledge that you're a part of a larger global community of caring Rams, but it also affords you access to numerous benefits, which we have on the next slide as well. And so some of those benefits include career services, exclusive discounts, and a suite of engagement opportunities to help you stay connected with Colorado State University and one another. And we have a really fun promotion going on in June. So this is our first day we're doing that. It's called Join in June. And so it's perfect for those hot summer days because if you join in June, you'll get a really awesome limited edition Rams beach towel. So definitely check that out. I'll be including a link in the chat here momentarily, but we'd love if you became a member and let me know if you have any questions about that. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So also really amazing opportunity within CSU Extension is the Master Gardener program. Established this wonderful program called Grow and Give in 2020 as a modern victory garden project in response to heightened levels of food insecurity resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Grow and Give continues to address food insecurity in Colorado by connecting backyard and community gardens to food donation sites across the state of Colorado. This program provides resources to help you both grow and give part of your harvest to those in need. Your local CSU Extension office can provide you more information and let us know if you have any questions. And we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. I have also, I'll add to my chat, my contact information, which I've already done, if you're having any trouble with technology. And then additionally, I'll include some information. The CSU Alumni Association has many other virtual events coming up this summer, and I'll provide that link to our website. We'll be sending out the recording to this webinar as well as some additional resources. So be on the lookout for that email in the next week. And then later on in the event, I'll also be putting our survey link in the chat. And if you would take a moment to fill that out, we greatly appreciate your feedback. So that's all the fun housekeeping stuff. And now I'm very excited to introduce you to our wonderful CSU Extension Larimer County agent, Amber Webb. Amber, thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. It is my pleasure to be here. And I'm super excited about this topic because I'll say this about most of my classes, but this is a favorite topic of mine. So thank you for joining today. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So this is such a fantastic a topic because our farmers market actually started in Larimer County, down at the Larimer County main courthouse facility last Saturday. And so this will be our third week going into this week. And so far we have had such great success. We've had more vendors than we've ever had before. And it's just so much excitement, and folks are so ready to be out and about and shopping, eating great food, and seeing their community again. So there's just a new renewed excitement. And so if you can take some new skills and some new knowledge with you to the market, I'm so happy to be a part of that. So one of the things that I'd love to start with is think about if you do shop at the farmers market, what is that day like for you? Do you think about recipes that you have planned for the week and you try to find ingredients to match those recipes, or do you go and you just start, looking and seeing what looks good, what looks delicious, what looks really fresh and wonderful, what's a great sale price? And do you let your purchases lead you that way? Just going and seeing what looks good. And I know that people do both. There's not one way, right one way or the other. There's a lot of really great ways to shop at the market. But think about that as I go through these slides. And think about what might make sense for you. If there's a few things I can suggest to you that you might change, that's wonderful. I would love you to take those tips with you today and take them into the market with you. So do you ever pass up on produce because you're not sure what to do with it? Say one of the farm stands that has lots of fresh fruit. So I'm thinking of just Beulah right off the top of my head, where they have beautiful apples and peaches and that kind of thing. Sometimes they'll have sales on big boxes or cases of fruit. And then sometimes even cases of fruit that are called seconds that have a little bit of damage on it. Do you know what to do when those kinds of opportunities come your way? And so think about that as we're going through, and maybe you can change some of those things. And when you're shopping, you consider buying extra, those taste discounts to preserve. And what I would love to do is not only help you with some seasonal tricks and tips, but also to consider preserving food when you're at the market and thinking about fresh produce that way. Because when you're preserving food, you're not only extending your resources, making that produce last a lot longer, but you're also helping to reduce food waste. Once you get that produce home, most people can let produce go bad in their refrigerators, on the countertops. And this is just a really great way to think about extending your resources, reducing food waste. Now, there's several preservation methods that are available, that are out there, and I'd love to share with you. Some of those are freezing, dehydrating, pickling, canning, and fermenting. I'm not going to have time to go over all of these things today, but I'm going to touch real lightly on each of these to kind of get your imagination going. Now, before we get to the market, I like to plan. I like to think ahead about what might be available to me, and I'm kind of getting you set up for a seasonal produce calendar. And I'll talk about that next, but I'm just trying to get you set up with some really great tips to start with. When you're going to market and you have those really great buys, but you're not sure what to do, one of the greatest things to do is to pull out your phone and log on to your Preserve Smart app. CSU has put together this app, and it's basically all of the different ways that you can preserve food, and it's all available at your fingertips. And not only that, it's all actually adjusted and calculated to altitude, high elevation food preservation. Not everybody knows this, but anywhere you are in Colorado is actually considered above altitude. And so any kind of food preservation recipe that you're going to find is going to need to be adjusted for that elevation. Well, this app actually already has that elevation pre-calculated for you. You can enter it in and it'll save it, and all those recipes will be adjusted to that. And before I go out to show you this screen, I did want to mention two other food sources that are really great to have before you go to market. One is called Food Smart Colorado, and this is our extension website that's been recently revamped. And this has all of our extension fact sheets on it. So if you're familiar with those fact sheets, it's all about individual methods for food preservation. So canning, pickling, dehydrating, fermenting, those were all originally on paper. Before we move things over to the app, they're still available if you like the paper version. I honestly love both. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew about that. You have that website available to you. And then also the National Center for Home Food Preservation. All of the extension offices across the country really rely on this center out of University of Georgia to come to us with the most updated information. So this is a great way to go as well. And before I move on, I'm going to do a stop share, Rachel, and I'm going to put in our Preserve Smart website. Can you see that?
Looks great.
Okay, great. So this is, the app is obviously for your phone, but we do have a website to go with it as well. So what you're looking at is the website version. I just wanted to do a quick little tour for you. Up here, you can set your elevation. You can look at different kinds of food preservation methods. So the different ways you can preserve food, and then also preservation basics. And the basics are some of the things I'm going to be covering with you today. This is by no means going to be exhaustive. I'm just going to do a really quick overview for you. But if you want to get down into the nitty gritty, These tools here are going to really help you. And in addition, I do teach classes on each preservation method specifically. I've been doing them virtually all this last year, but I will start doing classes again in person, so you can actually come in, learn how to can, learn how to dehydrate, learn how to pickle, and have a hands-on experience doing that with other folks. So those classes are going to be up and available soon. I'm reworking my schedule because of the different changes that we've had coming through and our availability to teach in person. So our website's going to be on at the end of the presentation, and you can check that out a little bit later on. But what I do want to show you is, for example, you're at the market and there's a great sale on tomatoes. So let's click on tomatoes and let's see what you can find. So the first thing is freezing. So if you were to go to this site, it shows you exactly how you want to select the produce. So firm, ripe tomatoes, you don't want any tomatoes that show signs of decay or mold. There's an amount that would be good, and then equipment that you would need in order to preserve it, which to freeze it, and then step-by-step instructions on how to prepare this vegetable for freezing. And here is even a brief description of how you can preserve differently for freezing. So you can freeze them raw, you can juice them and then freeze, or you can actually stew them to freeze. And in addition to these step-by-step instructions, there are also recipes available to you. So for instance, for canning, you have all of those step-by-step instructions. And then in addition to that, you have a whole mix of recipes that are available to you as well. So this is just a really great resource, and I would highly encourage you to look at it if you have time. But if you don't have time to look ahead, go to the market, download this app, and then just look right there when you're at the market. And I've actually purchased some things that I wouldn't have if I didn't have this in my hand otherwise. So it's just a great resource. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to go back to my presentation. Oops. Let me try that again here. Okay, we good, Rachel?
Looks great.
Okay. And Rachel, if we have questions come up during my talk, that's fine. You're welcome to jump in, or we can save to the end. I'm fine either way.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question already. Susan was just wondering if you teach any virtual classes, which I know you kind of alluded to a little, but do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the classes that I will have available virtually are going to be things like the basics of food preservation. So I'll go a little bit more into detail of the different kinds of methods, but I'll do a canning workshop, a pickling workshop, a jam and jelly workshop, most likely dehydrating, potentially a fermenting one as well. They're all really great in person, just because of that hands-on experience, but the lessons, the material that you need to know, what you need to consider in order to do something like that is all in those presentations. Happy to answer any questions as well. So anything that I do in person, I'll most likely offer virtually as well. Okay, so something else that I wanted to share with you is our seasonal calendar from produce. So this calendar I would highly recommend picking up. You can actually go to, it's coloradoproduce.org, and you can get a physical copy of it, which I have, and we hand these out at the farmers market. So if you're there, you can grab one there at our booth for our Master Food Safety Advisors. But when you're shopping, not all the produce is going to be available to you every single month because of seasonality. Things come in season, depending on the temperature, depending on the light. The needs of each different fruit and vegetable that you can grow is going to be a little bit different per month. So this calendar will give you a really good idea of what's going to be available to you as the season goes. And we're actually going through the end of October. I don't know the date exactly. You may, Rachel, but you'll see this produce calendar goes all the way to November. And all of these things are going to be available most likely to you through that time, through the end of October at least. So something that is important at the market is when you're shopping, there's a few considerations to make considering food safety. You're not going to want to purchase any produce that's damaged or bruised, except for those really, those special seconds for projects like canning. You'll want to make sure that you bag all of your ingredients separately. So let's say you have some really fresh cold lettuce from one vendor, and then you go and you get those roasted chilies from another vendor. You just want to make sure that you're not putting them right next to each other in the bags, because you need to keep your cold foods cold and your hot foods hot. And then if you do any kind of meat or poultry or dairy at the market, you want to keep those cold as well, and not let those hot peppers come in contact with that cold produce. And if you are at the market and you need a little extra hand with bags and that kind of thing, just get an extra bag, because it will be better for you, for your family, to not take that risk of mixing those hot and colds. When you're shopping and you're wanting to consider how to select the produce, in addition to trying to get the best and freshest produce available, think about what kind of storage you have at home. So if you buy something and a lot of it, does it need to be eaten right away, or can it last a little bit longer? And if it can last a little bit longer, I'm thinking of things like green beans. I feel like green beans can last a while in the refrigerator. And something that I wanted to mention that I'm going to give to Rachel to pass on to you is I have a fact sheet out of the University of Illinois, and this is called Garden to Table Storing Fresh Garden Produce. So this actually gives you a list of fruits and vegetables, how to store them at home once you get them home, the temperature, where to do it, how specifically to clean, how to store, and then the times that are going to keep all of this produce at their optimal conditions. There's just too much to list, but I'm going to give this to you, and I hope that you use it. It's so helpful. After you're shopping, make sure that you don't do a bunch of errands afterwards because of that food that you just purchased. Make sure you go directly home. Or if you're not going to go directly home, bring a cooler or an ice pack that you can keep that produce cool. You're going to want to refrigerate your food within about 2 hours of purchasing it out at the market. But if it's, if the temperature is above 90, you are going to need to refrigerate things within about 1 hour to keep things food safe. So back to this, this chart that I gave you. When you're storing your produce, what's the best way to store it at home? So some things like root vegetables are best stored in a cool place. So like in a paper bag, away from heat, away from light. Other things are best stored in the refrigerator or even in the freezer for longer term storage. So there's a lot of different considerations to make. If you've got a party coming up and you've got a completely full freezer, refrigerator packed with ingredients for that party, you have the space available to purchase an extra case of produce. So think about what you're going to go home to. So one of my favorite ways to preserve food is actually by freezing food. And what you're doing when you freeze food is you're preserving its freshness, its flavor, its texture, its nutrients, and you're slowing down the growth of any microorganisms and that enzyme activity that actually starts degrading that food. But if you're freezing it, you really want to consider several things in order to maintain the best quality product. So you're going to want to control for enzymes and air, ice crystals, and evaporation of moisture. And the best thing that I can offer as a visual is if you buy like meat from the market and it comes in that plastic wrap. If you put that container, that plastic wrap and the styrofoam and get directly in the freezer, and you pull out a couple weeks or a month later to cook, what is it like? It generally has the ice crystals on it. You might get a little bit of drying of that meat around it because it's that evaporation of moisture. And then generally you're going to taste that difference in that quality of meat if you're not prepping it for the freezer correctly because of these things here. And so I'm going to walk you through the best way to prepare food for the freezer. And I'm going to kind of jump back and forth between specific food preservation methods, such as freezing, dehydrating, pickling, canning, and then a more general way to think about food and preserving it outside of those classic food preservation methods, more just a smart way to think about food as a home cook. So I talked about earlier reducing food waste. You want to make freezing easy. So regularly check your freezer, your refrigerator, your pantry foods near the end of their shelf life, and then freeze those instead of throwing them out. It's a really great way to reduce waste that way. You'll want to use your foods in order of oldest to newest. So if you're in the restaurant industry, that's first in, first out. If you put something in the freezer, put it in the back and eat the older things first. And so you're not making those older foods get older and older and older. And when you're at the market, think about this. If there's a really great, beautiful loaf of bread you want to get, you're not going to be able to get through all of it in a week if it's just you or maybe you and one other person at home. Purchase a loaf of bread, eat what you want, and then freeze the rest. Bread freezes really well. A lot of people don't know that. And I have frozen loaves of bread in my freezer all the time. And I pull them out, put them in the oven for a couple minutes to heat it up, and it's just like a fresh loaf of bread. You can also freeze bones and dairy products and eggs. You can freeze nuts and flowers to extend their shelf life as well. If you've got anything in your kitchen, in your pantry, put it in the freezer. It'll make it last a little bit longer. And there is another fact sheet that I will have Rachel send to you that gives you a breakdown of those individual kinds of foods that we won't have time to cover today. Okay, so back to the market. You've got a really beautiful, let's say I'm seeing right here corn. Corn is a perfect way to preserve a vegetable. So you've got beautiful corn, you've got a lot of it, but what's the best way to preserve it? You're going to freeze it. But before you freeze it, you're going to need to blanch it. And what that does is, again, it's slowing that enzyme activity. It's preventing that loss of color and flavor and nutrients. And it also softens the vegetables. So think about if you were to cut a bunch of corn cut up in a package, or I'm thinking actually leafy greens would be a better example. Putting a huge head of kale in a freezer bag and putting it in the freezer bag is going to be a lot different than if you were to blanch it. And then it'll break it down a little bit and then you can pack it into a bag. So with corn, I wanted to, we can walk through the process exactly. For any kind of vegetable, you're going to want to blanch it before you freeze it. And we do have fact sheets and on the Food Smart website and on the Preserve Smart app, how to do this for different fruits and vegetables, because each one is going to act a little bit differently. But for all vegetables, you'll want to blanch before you freeze. And all you need to do is prepare an ice water bath and a pot of boiling water. To blanch, you're just going to wash your produce. You're going to cut it up to your desired size. You're going to place it in that boiling water for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on what it is. You're going to pull it out with a colander, put it in an ice water bath to stop that cooking. You're going to strain that off, dry it a little bit, and then put it in your freezer containers. And that is going to make the best quality product for you for later on. And corn is perfect because, you know, it's so fresh in the summertime, but you can use it throughout the year. Same thing, if you're going to want to prepare fruit, you need to pre-treat it as well. You don't need to blanch it. You can, but you don't have to. What you can do is to wash it, to dry it, put it in those the sizes that you want, cut it up into the sizes, and then you can pre-treat it with any of these methods. So vitamin C, ascorbic acid, citric acid, or lemon juice. And you'll get all of these slides as well. So specific ingredients and the fact sheets that you'll have. So if I move a little quickly, just know that you have all this information coming to you. One of my favorite ways to prepare fruit for the freezer is a tray pack. Right now, the beginning of June, I'm looking at the calendar, it's June 1st, is when the berries come in season and the berries go on sale. So this weekend, potentially even still today, maybe a couple days in, the berries are going to be on crazy good sale. And this is a great time to purchase them and to tray pack them. Just wash them, dry them, put them in the freezer for a couple hours until they dry. And then you just take a little spatula and pop them off and then put them in a freezer bag for later. It's so great for smoothies all summer long. I can think of a million things, but smoothies is the best way to start. And then freezing, making homemade jam and freezing that is another way. That's a really great way to use up fresh fruit that you find in the market. So this recipe is just as simple as it gets. You just need 4 cups of fresh fruit. You can actually defrost frozen fruit, make jam out of it, and refreeze it. Or you can just do that, from store-bought frozen fruit. You just need a little bit of sugar, 1.5 cups, a packet of pectin, or 5 tablespoons of instant pectin, All you do is combine it, blend it well, stir in crushed fruit, stir for 3 minutes, and ladle it into a freezer container and let it set for 30 minutes to thicken. And then refrigerate it for up to refrigerate for 3 weeks or freeze for up to a year. You are heating this to a boil, letting everything come together, letting it cool, and then putting in the jars. But for the quickest, easiest recipe, I wanted to share this with you. So this recipe will yield you, I'm looking for a half pint jar. I don't have one on me. Oh, here's one. I'll just grab it right now. This is your full pint-sized jar, and this is your half pint. So this recipe will make 5 of these. I hope you try it. So when you are preparing your produce for freezing, you're going to want to make sure that you use the right kind of packaging, because before we were talking about this evaporation of moisture, the air crystals, that kind of thing. You are going to want to make sure that you have airtight and odor-resistant packaging. You want it durable and leak-proof. You're not going to want to use things like reused dairy containers. I'll often use those for just using leftovers or chocolate vegetables or things like that, but not for this, because it needs to have a nice tight seal where there's not going to get air and moisture into them. And then for headspace, you want to make sure when you're packing those freezer bags or the freezer containers, because there's some moisture in there, that you want to leave some room for expansion. So I've got some amounts here for you. So you usually need about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of headspace for things to expand, for that liquid to expand in the freezer. But things like tray packed foods, they don't need headspace at all. You can also freeze in ice cube trays. So think about things like herbs, pesto, tomato sauce, fruit juice, broth. I love that one. Baby food or eggs. Once the eggs are cracked and whisked, you can absolutely put them in the freezer for later on for cooking. You just put them in a tray for about 4 hours or so, and you can pop those out and put them in a freezer bag for later. And then with labeling and storing, you'll absolutely want to make sure that you label your contents, because once things go in the freezer, it can be really hard to tell what things are after a little bit of time. So it's recommended that you do the name, the date, the time, freeze immediately below at 0 degrees. So check the temperature of your freezer, and then your product will be good quality for 12 to 18 months. If you go beyond that, it's not going to go bad generally right away, but the quality will start degrading the longer it is in that environment. Okay, so we talked about freezing. So we're going to move over to dehydrating. This is such a great option, especially for things like fruit. Personally for me, one of my favorite things to dehydrate is apples and pears. And when I get a good sale on those, I will absolutely pull out my dehydrator. So what you're doing when you're preserving that is you're removing that moisture so that those microorganisms can't grow and spoil in the food. Think about the storage that it takes up, so much less. Think about a 5-pound bag of apples. Generally, a 5-pound bag will, I'm looking for examples here, will put you in about a quart-sized bag or a quart-sized jar, like a mason jar of space. And then your flavors become a lot more concentrated. A couple different kinds of dehydrators you can consider. There's one that goes horizontal, so you can see here on the left, all of the air flow is going exactly horizontal. And that's a really great, very popular method. But then there's also a vertical airflow method, which you can see here on the right, where the air goes up and then around. Both of these are really great methods for dehydrating food. Both of them should have a thermostat that will range from 85 to 160 degrees, because like with blanching, each kind of produce is going to have a different temperature and a different time that you'll need to know before you start dehydrating. And we have fact sheets on all of those things. And yes, it is good to blanch your vegetables and to pre-treat the fruit before you dehydrate, in addition to freezing. So some really great ideas for dehydrating food for fruit is fruit leathers. You can make zucchini chips. You can make seasonings with herbs and onions. You can hydrate things like tomato sauce to put into soups, put into casseroles. You can dehydrate fruit to put in baking. That's a really, really fun one. You can also dehydrate things like jerky, which is really wonderful. And we do have fact sheets on making jerky as well. One of my favorite things that I discovered coming into Extension that our volunteers have made were salsa leathers. So they actually make salsa, puree it, make it just like a fruit leather, but then you have this really amazing concentrated leather that you can put in cooking for later to really amp up the flavor and use as you would like a dry seasoning. You can definitely preserve herbs. That's one of my favorite things to do. Again, I'll say favorite every time because they're all my favorite. Sturdy herbs such as rosemary, sage, and thyme, some are savory. These are all really great. You can actually do this without a food dehydrator. And you can see the perfect example here in the picture. You just tie them into small bundles and then hang them up, put them in a place where they're going to get a lot of air exposure, but not exposure to fumes, like somewhere in your garage, something like that. With other herbs, you can also hang them up inside of paper bags that if they're a lot more delicate. Things like basil are really perfect for that, or cilantro. You can also air dry herbs just on a tray like this. So for those hardier herbs, put them on a tray, clean, dry them, put them in a place they're going to be out of the way, and it'll take you about a week or so. These will get nice and brittle, and then when they're done, you can pack them for storage. And with these jars, this is a perfect example of the best way to preserve, with one caveat. I couldn't find a photo online that is the best way to do it. And that's my third bullet point, is to leave them whole. Don't crush them yet. So say you have something like, I'll come back here, like the sage you'll see here is on the full stem, as well as it looks like thyme there. Think about like a rosemary stem. It's really nice and party. Keep those whole and then put them in those jars. And then when you pull them out, when you crush them for that first time, it's going to release that aroma and those essential oils for the first time. It's going to be the most flavorful versus if you were to crush them up, that just breaks them down a little bit. It's not going to harm it too much. I really do believe that you're going to get a lot more flavor out of it when you keep that whole and preserve those oils. And when you're using those dried herbs, you can keep those stems. So think about when you're using like a bay leaf in your cooking, like in your soup or your stews, or even stocks. You put bay leaf in there for good flavor. Well, you can reserve those stems of the rosemary and the sage and the thyme and put those in your soup and use those as your bay leaves and then take them out. And you're going to get so much flavor out of those as well. Something I love to do is pickling. And it doesn't have to be a very long, involved process with like a fermented pickle. You can actually quick pickle. And I do this all the time. I'm kind of shouting it from the rooftops. Everybody should be quick pickling because in addition to freezing, it is such a great way to preserve food and to make something so quick and tasty and flavorful before it goes bad. So all you're doing when you're pickling is just increasing the acidity to inhibit the unsafe organisms from growing. And so you're doing this with an acid ingredient such as a vinegar or lemon juice. But if you're going to use vinegar, you want to make sure it's at least 5% acidity and don't use any more than or any less than equal parts of water. So for say, don't use like a quarter cup of vinegar and 3/4 cup of water. Make sure it's at least half and half. And what you're doing is you're helping to inhibit those microorganisms from growing. I've seen a lot of, I'm making a note to myself here to make sure you all get the pickling fact sheet. I've seen some recipes and cookbooks that call for different ratios, but because of my understanding of the science back here, I'm always going to do half and half. And it really doesn't change the flavor that much. So how do you quick pickle vegetables? I'm going to send you a step-by-step instruction fact sheet with a chart of how to. But the easiest way to explain it is just wash and prepare your vegetables, select and measure your seasonings, pack your jars with your vegetables and seasonings, make a brine, fill your jars with brine, cool the jars on the countertop for a little bit, and then refrigerate. And you have quick pickles for a couple of weeks. One of my favorite things to quick pickle is green beans and beets for salads. But you can quick pickle anything pretty much. And here's just a little example of different kinds of herbs that you can use, either dry or fresh. And then an example of the brines. So for example, if you want to do like down below, this is typically what I'll do, is 2 pint jars. And all you need is, so again, this is the pint jar here. This is a great way you can do quick pickle of beans. These are actually cooked beans, but this is what your quick pickle beans would look like. Cup of vinegar, cup of water, tablespoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then you can put in fresh dill or fresh dill seeds, you can garlic, things like that, and then just eat them for a couple of weeks. It's so delicious. And so back to just a really basic tip for reducing waste when you're at home and cooking. All this cooking that you're going to be doing over the course of the summer. Something I love to recommend to people for freezing, another way to use your freezer, is to keep your cooking scraps in a bag. So when you're preparing soup and you're making celery, carrots, onions, parsley stems, things like that, you make sure they're washed and then cut off the tips that you would normally discard, put them in a freezer bag and put it away. And then when the bag is full, take those scraps and put it in a pot of water and you make homemade broth. You can add your herbs and spices. You can add the bones of your rotisserie chicken or beef stock bones and simmer for a couple of hours in a big pot of water. You can do it in an instant pot. You can do it in a crock pot. And when you're done, strain everything off and then freeze those in a muffin pan or in ice cube trays, and then have those in your freezer for later for soup bases. I have a toddler that's 20 months now, and one of his favorite things is I will just defrost a little muffin tin sized portion of broth for him. And I have never offered it to him and he'll refuse it. He will never refuse it if I offer it to him. So, and it's just such a great thing to have around. Great thing to do if you make your own ramen noodles, is to make your own broth that way. Something else that's really great for freezing to reduce food waste is making leftovers. So think about, again, you're back at the market, you see a really great deal on something like carrots or corn or beets or beans or whatever. You can double or triple your recipes and then freeze them for later. Sometimes, you have one day a week that you have the time to do that. Use that time and prepare and plan ahead. Again, when things are seasonal, they're going to be a lot better priced than when they're not in season. So those berries, for example, right now are going to be great prices versus in the middle of the winter time. And then I touched on this earlier. Think about freezing bread. We have got some amazing bakers in Fort Collins with some really beautiful products to offer. If you are in the mood, buy it, eat what you want, and then freeze the rest for later. When you have excess vegetables, a really great way to preserve them is to roast them. Cook them on a sheet pan for about 30 to 45 minutes, 425 degrees, a little oil, a little salt and pepper, and then let them cool, put them in the freezer. And then you can add those defrosted cooked vegetables to anything. Think pizza, eggs, tacos, casseroles, just about anything you can imagine. You'll have these beautiful cooked vegetables that are ready to go. So we're almost close on time. So I'm going to just touch really briefly on canning because this is a really big ask for extension. And this got really popular over the last year as people were growing a garden and wanting to preserve food. Canning is very simple. It's just placing food in jars, heated to a temperature that destroys microorganisms and inactivates those enzymes. So with freezing, you're slowing it, but with canning, you're actually destroying those enzymes and making it shelf stable for much longer. So that's really what makes things shelf stable. You're heating it, and then when you're cooling it, you're creating that vacuum seal, which then prevents that spoilage during storage. So there's 2 different kinds of canning, and it really depends on the pH of the product. So if you've got a water bath canner, you're going to use it with acidic foods, things like fruits, pickles, jams, jellies, acidified tomatoes. But on the other hand, if you want to do something like vegetables or meat or poultry, or even chili peppers, you can get the chili peppers at the market. You can can your chili peppers for later, but that's the safest way to do it is pressure canning because it's low acid. So for example, like vegetables like this, green beans, you're going to have to pressure can because it's a low acid food. And what you're doing when you're canning is, again, with that heat, you're preventing botulism by making sure that you have the right temperature and the right preservation method. So either an acid with water bath foods, or you have high temperature in pressure canning, excuse me. And these are just a couple different methods. So just need to make sure that you understand there's a difference in the two types of methods because of acidity. Steps to successful canning. You just want to make sure that you review your tested recipe and instructions first. There's a lot of popular recipes out there in magazines and websites that don't have the science-backed tested methods for food preservation. And it can be a really dangerous thing. You can create botulism in canned foods if you don't do it properly. So make sure you come to a state extension website or something like National Center for Home Food Preservation to get your recipe. You're going to want to plan time for canning because it can take several hours. You want to select the freshest ingredients possible, which we talked about before, and then you want to assemble your equipment. And that equipment looks like this. You have two different kinds of canners. You'll need mason jars, you'll need a jar lifter, a lid wand, bubble freer, a funnel to get the food in there, and then a timer for the right kind of timing. And again, we've got all those recipes on the Preserve Smart website or on the Food Smart website. I would highly recommend that you choose either one of those things. And then again, you will need to adjust for altitude. You won't have to if you're using this method or if you're using our CSU extension fact sheets. But think again why you have to do that. For boiling water, you have to add time to instructions due to the lower boiling point of water altitude. But with a pressure canner, you need to increase the pressure due to the lower atmospheric pressure altitude. So it's a little bit tricky, but you'll see here, there's a chart actually from ball canning that shows you the difference in processing time depending on the altitude that you're at. So again, I'll have classes later on in the season that you can come and practice with me here at the Extension office. But I would highly encourage you to check out these resources and to think ahead about what you might want to preserve. And hopefully, I threw a lot of information at you, but hopefully this will help you. Hopefully you picked up one or two little tips that you'd like to take with you to the market. And hopefully we'll see you there because I'll plan on being there quite a bit. So that's it for today.
I love it. Thank you so much, Amber. I gotta say, I was really eyeing those yummy looking green beans that you had in that can. I was like, that
Yeah.
We do have some questions and we're definitely open to a few more. So if you have one that you've been holding on to, definitely go ahead and put that in the chat or the Q&A. One of the first questions, this came up regarding, I believe, kind of the fruit preservation side of things and making your own jams and jellies. They're curious, is it okay to substitute things like Splenda for those, especially that may have like diabetes or other dietary needs?
Yes, absolutely. So there are specific recipes for low fruit jams and jellies. And so you would need to make sure that you have that recipe specifically. We do have those recipes available through CSU Extension, but also you're going to find those with like ball and even like the pectin that you need for canning. There are low sugar pectin specifically. So you need the right recipe and you need the right pectin in order to do that, but you can absolutely do that safely.
Awesome. Next question we have is, it seems like when I'm dehydrating, I get more of a leathery product instead of a crisp result like for apples or jerky. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're probably, you might even be experiencing is called case hardening. And what that is the outside gets drier quicker than the inside has time to evaporate all of the moisture. And so you can get that leathery consistency. And sometimes that could even get moldy because there's still moisture inside. So what you'll want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you're cutting at a consistent thickness for every single piece that you put on the dehydrator. So if having something like a mandolin that has that measured thickness can really be helpful, but also the temperature. So if you're dehydrating at a higher temperature than what's good for something like apples, then it's going to dehydrate a lot quicker. And so you might need to use a lower temperature. So again, with our fact sheets, it will give you the right thickness and the right temperature, in addition to how to pre-treat it to make the best kind of product available. So like with apples, I love to dip them in a little bit of lemon juice and water combination, and do no less than, I'm gonna say like a 1/4 inch thick. And I can't tell you what the temperature is right off the top of my head, but all that information should be available to you. I know that it is.
Fabulous. Yes, those fact sheets are extremely helpful, especially for those really specific questions or needs on there. There's a lot of resources on Extension's website. So the next question we have is, in Colorado, cool and dry. The dry is not a problem, but what exactly is meant by cool?
So cool and dry, interesting. So is that for, if somebody could answer that, cool and dry in reference to what?
Yeah, I'm not
like the
sure what part of
pantry?
the presentation
Yeah.
the question came from, but please let us know and we'll move to the next question. But if you could let us know what part of the presentation you meant on the cool and dry, I am happy to answer that for you.
Okay.
So the next question we have is, does the app you shared include how to tell when food is ripe and ready to buy, like melons and pineapple?
I don't believe so. Not in the selection of produce. Let me see here. But I do believe that we have a fact sheet on the best selection of produce. That one specifically is for storage. I'm just scanning the one that I was looking at earlier. I'm pretty sure we have that available, and I can make that available to you that you can give out, Rachel. That's a really great question.
Awesome. Yes, thank you for asking about their awesome app. And maybe you just download it and maybe you can explore a little bit more too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also a really great question for your farmer. This is, sometimes conversations can be a little bit, I don't know what to ask. I don't know, how to select something is the farmer specialty. They will tell you what's the kind of thing that you're looking for, and they can help you. So some people might want a less ripe lemon or melon, excuse me, because they have like something happening at the end of the week, versus somebody, they have a party or, they're doing a lunch that day and they want something really, really ripe. The farmer is going to be able to tell you exactly what to look for in the produce that they're going to give you. So I'm sure it's written down, but maybe a conversation is even better.
I love that. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have that in mind. I think when shopping at a farmer's market, you can, let the farmer know what you're shopping for specifically, and they'll help you out. And this person did say, thank you. That selection guide sounds really awesome and helpful.
Okay, great.
And we do have a follow-up to the cool and dry questions.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving us that follow-up. Cool and dry was in regard to herb and vegetable storage.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm thinking like olive oil. A lot of people, including myself at times, will store their olive oil next to the stovetop when you're cooking, because it's right there, it's handy, and a lot of us have been trained to do that. But olive oil producers are saying, don't store it next to heat, don't put it in the light. And so a lot of olive oil will come in dark jars because that will speed up its rancidity process. And if you put it next to heat, next to your stovetop, that's also going to speed up it going bad. Same thing with herbs and anything like that you're storing. You don't want to put it next to a heat source, or let's say on top of a refrigerator, it can be hot. Or if there's a really warm spot in your kitchen, like if there's a sunlight that comes in, during some part of the day on your countertop that's going to get beat up by sun for a couple of hours or a whole afternoon, don't put those things in that place. Put it up maybe in a cabinet a little bit away from the stovetop or away from a sunlight source, because that will affect how quickly things start going bad.
Good to know about the olive oil. I'm going to run down and move mine really quick.
It's so funny. It really is a juxtaposition of how to take care of something.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
All right, we have a couple more questions, and we'll probably have time for maybe one or two more if you have one still. We have someone curious about how to use a convection oven for drying herbs.
Ooh, that's a really great question. So I do have a fact sheet. So I have not personally, just full disclosure, I have not dried food in a convection oven, but I believe it is absolutely doable. We have a fact sheet specifically for dehydrating in different kinds of environments. So ovens are a possibility, even a conventional oven, because of the light can be used as a heat source. I know that vegetables generally are about 150 is a good temperature for a lot of vegetables. And so you want to make sure that you have low enough temperatures for dehydrating. So if you wanted to do it that way, check that temperature. And then the timing would be important as well. And you should specifically look on the CSU website for convection ovens, because I know the information is out there. I just don't have that experience. My apologies.
Fabulous. Thank you, Amber.
Mhm.
Yes, I hope you all go out and explore their wonderful website after this today. We do have a question asking if you could show that slide again that had the Food Smart app and the web addresses that was at the beginning of the presentation. We'll
Absolutely.
include this also in the post-event email hyperlinked, but I know Amber is more than happy to reshare that. You can jot it down now in case you were really needing it today. Our post-event email will probably go out early next week, if not the end of this week. It takes a few days for us to get those out. So
let me see if I can jump back.
Awesome.
My apologies. We'll do this real quick. About 50 slides worth here. Oh, there we go.
Awesome. So there is that slide for you again, if you want to jot that down. And again, we'll include that as well in our post-event email. And while I'm at it, I'll just go ahead and put the survey in the chat. We're not quite done yet. If you have another question or two, we'll hang out. But if you want to complete this survey, it really does help us with your feedback. Let us know how we did. Let us know if you have any other topics. Obviously, Amber teaches so many wonderful topics regarding all things food prep and preservation. So if there was a specific one that really caught your eye that you'd like us to bring to you, definitely let us know. And we'll give it just another minute or so if you had two more questions for Amber while we have her here. And of course, know she's a great resource for you as well moving forward. So your time with her doesn't have to end today.
Thank you, Rachel.
Of course. And I may have to, look at my pantry and see what other weird storage things I'm doing with my here.
It really is amazing how specific things can be, but it really does make a difference.
Absolutely. And I'm also super excited about all the fruit going on sale because I'm definitely a big fruit person. So that'll be really, really awesome to be able to have that. We do have a couple more questions that did just come in. So we'll finish up with those. Thanks so much, everyone, for all your really thoughtful questions today. So someone is curious, does the CSU Extension site have tips on how to rehydrate foods that have been dehydrated?
Yes, they are on our fact sheet for sure. So yes, I can't think of specifically. Yes, there is.
You could tell us anything, and I think a lot of us would be like, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. So we'll be sending out lots of resources. So I'm excited for you all to get this wonderful email that Amber's going to help me get together for you to help with that question. That's a great question on how to rehydrate things. I'm sure, Amber, you teach so much on dehydrating. The rehydrate question isn't one as common.
Yeah, it's true.
Awesome. So we have someone who's curious if you can elaborate on freezing dairy products and eggs. She's curious if the eggs need to be cooked and if dairy products can be kept in the original packaging.
Such a great question. And I don't have that specific fact sheet in front of me, but so eggs are really interesting. So let's see. So with eggs, you can actually eat eggs past about a month past its sell-by date. And there's a difference in like the best by, sell by, all of those kinds of different expirations. Those are from food manufacturers, but I know specifically eggs should have sell by on them. And so it's not like you're not buying them by the expiration. They'll go a month past. When you're freezing eggs, you have to crack them. I think egg whites are better than egg yolks, but they can be done both. You can basically like whisk the egg and then put it in individual ice cube trays, and then put those in a Ziploc bag later on. And then you would use those as you would use like a 1-to-1 ratio with baking. So you have about a tablespoon of an egg and then you can defrost that and use that later. So for things like cheeses that are, let's just say like a block of cheddar cheese, it's in a full, like a complete package that's vacuum sealed. You can definitely freeze it that way. But other things are, it's recommended that you, like if you get it fresh cut, like from like a cheese counter, you'll want to put it in something like a cheese paper or butcher paper, and then put it in a Ziploc bag. And a part of what I'm going to be sending out is specifics on things like eggs and dairy and milk that are really helpful. I never thought about freezing dairy before I got this job, but I freeze it all the time now. I'm on a buy nothing group on Facebook, actually, if you're not familiar with it, which is a whole community of people that love just gifting things out of abundance. And so I often will see people gifting buttermilk, which is the funniest thing to, gift open food. And I personally wouldn't do it, but some people will say, I use 2 tablespoons for a recipe. I don't know what to do with this buttermilk. Somebody come take it. And I always say, did you know that you can freeze your buttermilk for later? So I'll just freeze if I get buttermilk, I'll freeze it in a 1/2 pint jar, and then use it later for baking. Same thing can be done with heavy cream or milk. Butter is really great for refreezing for later on too. You use what you need and then have the rest for later. It's a great way to reduce that food waste. And you'll get that sheet.
I love that. I'm thinking about the heavy cream that I use for like a recipe and then don't know what to do with. So that's great to know too.
Yeah.
I'm excited for these fact sheets myself. Well, we're running out of time here, Amber. Do you have any last parting words for our audience today?
Well, I would just encourage you to just explore new things at the farmers market, to try new things, and to have a conversation with your farmer, because there might be something that you'll learn through that conversation. You will learn something, and you will I just think it'll open up your mind to new things, and you'll be able to share what you learn with other people. And there's just so much deliciousness available if you just do a couple extra things to be prepared for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber, for your time and expertise today, and for providing all these awesome resources to everyone too. In the meantime, everybody, you stay safe out there, stay stalwart, and go Rams. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.